So, for ways through which the U.S. government as well as industrial advances affected the Plains Indians, one of the most important factors was the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, what happened is various tribes and Plains Indian tribes basically made agreements and treaties with the federal government that they would not have their land encroached upon, such as the Treaty of Fort Laramie, which allowed Indians to settle westward. So basically, what happened then is when the Transcontinental Railroad was constructed and they were laying the tracks, many of the workers would hunt down the bison and buffalo that the Indians were dependent on for a source of protein, and they basically killed them off as sport. Now, what happens is the Native Americans require bison as their meat source, but they also use it for various other sources. They use every part of the bison. Secondly, much of the Plains Indians' lifestyle was affected by actions that the U.S. government themselves took and enforced upon the Plains Indians. For example, the Dawes Act from 1887. Basically, what happened is the U.S. government treated Native Americans as individuals rather than tribes and split up the whole tribal system by giving allotments of land to each head of the family. Now, what they're basically doing here was the government split up all of the traditions and customs that the American people were now enforcing onto these Native Americans, and basically the Americans lost their entire tribal system. But additionally, other things that the U.S. government did were make treaties that they would later then infringe. For example, the Treaty of Fort Laramie, where basically Indians agreed to allow settlers to move westward. Basically, the settlers would then take over the land that wasn't theirs, that wasn't part of the treaty. So this also affected the lifestyle of the Plains Indians in another way. Finally, the Plains Indians' lifestyle was affected by the fact that the U.S. government made them try to assimilate with the culture of white man. Basically, any traditions like the ghost dance, for example, were basically deemed by the government to be unallowable or illegal within the United States. So other actions that the government took were to assimilate the Native Americans into the culture of white society by taking away many of their traditions and customs, as well as taking away any land that they could use that would be fertile and handing it over to the Western settlers. So often, many of the traditions that the Native Americans would lose would simply because people would be dying out because they would no longer have a food source from having unfertile land. So essentially, the quagmires that the Native Americans in the Plains region felt were essentially perpetuated by actions of the U.S. government to assimilate Native Americans into white society.